Hey guys, today we're gonna talk about our favorite Black Templars again, and we will figure out which is the better dedicated melee choice, the Bladeguard or the Sword Brethren. Let's dive right in. And first, the basic overview. Both are elite choices. A 10-man Sword Brethren squad costs 220 points, and a 6-man Bladeguard Veteran squad, which is the max size for the Bladeguard, costs 210. So just 10 points in price difference, almost the same kind of price range. Point for point, the Bladeguard are 11.7 points and Sword Brethren are exactly 11, so they are slightly cheaper in general. Both are dedicated melee squads with almost no in case of Bladeguard and a limited amount of shooting in case of the Sword Brethren. And the Sword Brethren have leadership 8 and the Bladeguard have leadership 9, which is probably the first disadvantage that the Sword Brethren have, one of few, and I don't think it's a big problem, because if you're running Black Templars, it's very likely that you're going to have a chaplain in your midst all the time, and chaplains give their leadership 9 to units within 6 anyway, so you're probably gonna have that leadership 9 anyway, but that's just something to keep in mind. Especially considering that Sword Brethren are a more numerous squad, so it's more likely to lose some models because of morale. Bladeguard are 3 wound models with a 4+ invulnerable save and 2+ armor save, whereas Sword Brethren are basic 3+ save marines. But with Uphold the Honor of the Emperor, they get 5+ invulnerable save. Obviously, as the Uphold of the Honor of the Emperor is our mainstay choice for the oaths for the Black Templars, both would also get the Baby Transhuman ability, and the Sword Brethren also have a special rule that allows them to ignore the passion of that Uphold the Honor vow, allowing them to gain the benefit of cover. So they virtually have access to the 2+ save when they're in cover, whereas Bladeguard have 2+ save all the time, but would not get it to 1-up in any case because of the passion. For those of you who don't know what passion is, it's basically the drawback of each of the oaths that you can choose as Black Templars player. The oaths that we choose always is the Uphold the Honor of the Emperor, 5+ invulnerable save, and Baby Transhuman, which is not being able to wound your models on 1s and 2s, but the drawback is that you cannot gain the benefit of light cover in any shape or form. So even if you are inside a ruin, you still don't get +1 to your save. And I think the wording is that you also don't get dense cover as well. In terms of melee output, we're going to talk in detail about that slightly later in the video, but they have 25 attacks for those 6 guys. It's strength 5, AP 3, damage 2. The sergeant has 1 extra attack, so that's why it's 25, even though it's 6 models. And the Sword Brethren don't have that problem because Sword Brethren don't have a sergeant, which is an interesting thing. It's a rare case for Space Marines. And Sword Brethren will have a total of 42 attacks with a number of different melee weapons, but mostly they're damage 2, and only 8 attacks are damage 3 with Thunderhammers. Before the changes to Arcs of Omen, when all the war gear has dropped to 0 in price, we had to pay for all the special weapons on the squads, like the plasma guns, the plasma pistols, the mauls, lightning claws, swords, all that jazz. Now we don't pay for that, so we only pay the base price of the Sword Brother himself, and that's why we are now comparing the Bladeguard to them, because this is now quite a fair comparison, especially considering that the Bladeguard have not actually dropped in price at all. Now, the durability of the 2 squads in question. With only 10 points difference in their price, they are very close in their point per wound value, as you have seen in the previous slide. So you get 20 wounds with Sword Brothers and 18 wounds with Bladeguard. Having a 4+ invulnerable save elevates Bladeguard above the Sword Brothers considerably, allowing them to ignore 50%, half of all the incoming high AP attacks, compared to 33% with Sword Brothers. 2+ armor save is also very important against AP 0 and AP 1 attacks. Yes, unfortunately, you will not benefit against AP 2 attacks even when cover, because you don't get cover with the passion, but that's still a very useful thing to have. There are some things, especially now with Armor of Contempt gone, the AP 0, AP 1 guns are popping up more and more in the game. I have just yesterday played a game against Death Guard, and I've been shot with a lot of AP1 flamers from the Death Shroud Terminators, and the shots were directed into my Storm Shield guys, and I was really glad that I had that 2+ save on them. Putting all that into numbers, you'd need 162 bolt rifle shots. Bolt rifle is strength 4, AP1, damage 1, against the Bladeguard to kill all 6 of them on average, and 120 shots to kill all 10 Sword Brothers on average. Where the situation is trickier to estimate is with multi-damage attacks. Damage 2 is very efficient against Sword Brothers and not nearly as much efficient against Bladeguard. It's actually very bad against Bladeguard, and vice versa for damage 3, where the damage 3 is actually wasted against the Sword Brothers. And that math becomes ever more complicated if we add the Litany of Divine Protection, which we also have access to. So if you have the 5-up shrug, damage 2 guns are suddenly not as bad for your 2 wound guys. Damage 3 are actually very good against your 2 wound guys because they're likely to finish them off anyway, and the damage 3 guns are not very dangerous anymore for the Bladeguard. Still probably killing some, but not nearly as much. That is the general overview of their durability. In short, the Bladeguard are more durable in general in most circumstances. The 4+ invulnerable save has this interesting effect that sometimes you can roll it very, very well. Again, in the same game I had yesterday, I've been attacked by, I think I had to roll 13 saves for my kill team, my Deathwatch kill team, and the Terminator with a Storm Shield was tanking, has tanked with a 5-up shrug 9 4+ saves with all the 5-up shrugs I had. That's the power of the 4+ invulnerable save combined with any other layer of protection like the Feel No Pain. The damage output, that is the part that we are all interested in because it's a melee, dedicated melee squad, and that's actually where the power of the Sword Brethren lies, I think. Bladeguard all have identical mastercrafted power swords as we discussed earlier, and total of 25 attacks, strength 5, AP3, damage 2. Sword Brethren carry a variety of melee weapons: mauls, swords, hammers, axes, and claws. You also can take the chain swords, but why would you? Because the power weapons don't cost you any extra points, so probably not really necessary. Big drawback of that is that you will have to roll all this stuff separately, which means that every time your Sword Brethren have to attack, you will be spending quite a lot of time on that. And if you're a competitive player, you really want to be able to cut the time on rolling the dice and have more time to think, because rolling the dice is just a mechanical motion that you have to do, and it doesn't really change the outcome in any way, whereas thinking is how you win the game. So you don't want anything to take away from your time any more than it should. So that's a small drawback that the Sword Brethren have with the fact that they all have different weapons. But, and that's an important but, as you can see from the results, let's read through them quickly. I've compared the Bladeguard and the Sword Brethren against 4 targets that I think are quite a good representation of what you can actually expect from a squad to do on the tabletop, not in the imaginary world of Math Hammer, but actually like when you put them on the table. These are the things that you are likely to encounter, or their counterparts. Like, for example, Guardsman can also be an Eldar Guardian or a Kabbalite Warrior, right? It's almost the same thing. So you can imagine pretty much the same results for them. And I was comparing against Rhino, Intercessors, Redemptors, and as I said, Guardsmen. So the Bladeguard have scored 9.3 damage against the Rhino, have killed 9 Intercessors, have scored 4.3 damage against the Redemptor, and also killed 11 Guardsmen. Sword Brethren with Exploding Sixes from the unique stratagem they have in the Black Templars book, and I decided to count with it because it only costs 1 command point for your 10-man squad, and I don't think that you would ever fight with the Sword Brethren without that stratagem. If you want to know how much you would score without it, just subtract about 20% out of the results that you have here. So the Sword Brethren have scored 15 damage against the Rhino, so more than the Rhino has wounds. That's good. They have killed 9.5 intercessors, so almost the same as the Bladeguard, which is understandable because the Bladeguard's swords are pretty much the best weapon against the intercessors, almost. The Sword Brethren have scored 13 damage against the Redemptor, which is exactly how many wounds one has, and it's 3 times more than what's the Bladeguard scored. And the Sword Brethren has scored 21 dead guardsmen. And now let's crunch these numbers and analyze why all that stuff happened. Here lies the biggest disadvantage that the Bladeguard have, in my opinion, compared to the Sword Brethren. The Bladeguard all have damage to low mid-strength attacks, which are only efficient against a very narrow type of target, because they're not really efficient against tanks, because, for example, in this case, a 6-man squad of Bladeguard are not even killing a Rhino on average. They're almost killing it, but not fully, and I can attest to that I had situations where my squad did not kill a Rhino, and it sounds about right. They're killing a lot of intercessors. They're munching through a 5-man squad. They can finish off a 10-man squad if you're lucky, or they will almost finish it and they'll probably run from morale. So against intercessors and targets of that type, which are not actually that many in the game, there are some but not exactly, they're good. Against the Redemptor, they're pretty bad because it's a vehicle, so it's hard to punch through that toughness for their strength 5. But the most important part is their damage 2 is completely wasted. And that's the big issue with them, that there are so many important threats in the game who have -1 damage or half damage. And when you actually need to kill that stuff, you don't need that damage too. You need a lot of attacks, or you need high damage, like damage 3 or higher. And Bladeguard don't have that, which is a big problem for them. And Guardsmen, we have killed a measly 11, which is just slightly more than a small, regular sized squad. The best type of melee weapons for a melee squad usually is exactly what the Sword Brethren have. A whole bunch of damage 1 attacks, which don't care about the -1 damage, but have the AP and strength in some cases, because yes, we have swords there as well, which are also strength 5, but we have lightning claws, which reroll all wounds and have an extra attack, which compensates for their low strength, and they still have high AP. We have power moles, which are strength 7, so it's easier for them to wound. We have power axe, which is in middle of the road kind of thing, and obviously the thunder hammer, which is good against -1 damage and good against toughness 7 vehicles, which is what you actually really want to be able to kill when the time comes. So all in all, in real-life scenarios, a 10-man Sword Brethren squad will be much more efficient in melee than the Bladeguard. The Bladeguard, even though I love that squad with all my heart, I've been talking about that on this channel for a number of episodes, but I do believe that they have an issue in their real-life reliability in combat because of that profile they have. It sounds very cool. It's actually very cool for something like a character, because characters rarely actually fight, and if it's your backline character and something like charges it out of the blue and you need to defend yourself, it's good to have that extra damage too, because it might be useful. It's unlikely that you've been charged by a Dreadnought, but in scenarios where you are in the middle of the board and you are actually encountering the heavy hitters of your opponent, you need that reliability and the versatile attacks like the Sword Brethren have. So, boys and girls, I think that the Sword Brethren are a better choice if you're looking for something that can punch better in combat. If you need just a distraction, you need something that can tank wounds better. If you are looking to have like an apothecary in your force and to revive models and put them back on the table, maybe to give one of the Bladeguard, the Sergeant, the damage 3 sword and the 2+ weapon skill, +1 attack, +1 wound that upgrade the champion of the feast. Then the Bladeguard can be a good choice for you. Otherwise, for just melee power, Sword Brethren are great. And also it's beneficial to have more models because, for example, if you are running Rites of War Warlord trait, or if you will use that that command phase OPSEC strat, having more bodies on the objective is beneficial. So let me know what you think about them in the comment section below. I'm really interested if you think which one you think is better and which one you use personally for your Black Templars collection, and I'll see you next time.